Storm Bowling Products, the Bowlers Company, presents the Storm Collegiate Spotlight with Steve Klemkin and Tim Berg. Storm's Executive Director of Marketing and Above180.com's Tim Berg are going to introduce a variety of collegiate players, coaches, and key people involved in promoting the sport of bowling. Now, here's Coach K and Tim Berg.
Joining us on the Storm Collegiate Spotlight Podcast is Bob Benoit. Bob is the head bowling coach at Peru State College. Bob has 4 PBA titles and is mostly known for being the first bowler ever to roll a perfect game in a televised title match. Bob, it's Tim Berg and Coach K, Steve Klemkin here. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
All right, Bob, well, you're the head bowling coach there at Peru State College, and I want you to talk about, you guys are a very new program, but first off, I think a lot of people are wondering how did that come about? How did you go from your time out on tour to what happened after tour to now coaching a collegiate program there?
Well, I coach a high school here. This is going to be my 4th year of coaching the Seaman High School. And last year, there was a envelope from Peru State College that was sent to Seaman High School, and that was kind of strange. And I opened it up, and I found this, they were looking for a bowling coach. They wanted to start up a new program. So I contacted them and to see what they had, and they offered me the position to come up to Nebraska and take over the program and try to build a new program. And at first I turned them down because I didn't want to leave my high school. I love those kids. And so I turned it down, and they called me 3 weeks later and said, look, we've got to get you involved somehow. What can we do here? So we talked and we came to a deal, and Skip Wilson is also involved with me to help coach the team and try to build the team, and he coaches Buhler High School in Hutchinson. So we've been driving up there, and it's been a little rough so far.
And how far of a drive is that for you, getting up there?
It's about an hour and 15 minutes, hour and 10 minutes from where I live, so it's not bad.
Okay.
But, it will be in the wintertime.
The wintertime, it could get a little hairy, I'm sure, yeah. And are there bowling lanes on campus, or is it something off campus? You have a center that's dedicated that you'll be using for practices?
Well, they don't have anything on campus. In fact, we have it set up here at Gage Bowl in Topeka. They're giving the kids vans from the school, and they're driving here on Saturdays to hold a 3 to 4 hour practice session here, to where we can set up all the training devices and try to get this team going.
Now, one of the things I got to ask you about coaching-wise here, and I know a lot of people, of course, know you as a competitor and a professional PBA champion, and, of course, your 300 game on TV that so many people remember. But, your brother Rick is known as far as coaching goes, too, and with the Bowl U program, and he's been highly involved with coaching. Have you ever had any kind of intensive coaching philosophy discussions with your brother?
I have. In fact, after I turned down the initial job with Peru, I offered it to my brother. My brother went up and spoke to them, and they offered it to him. And for some reason, he decided to decline on the offer. Some of the coaching things that my brother has, I agree with. Some of them I don't. We have a little bit of a conflict on some of our coaching thoughts. I'll just kind of leave it at that. So, we don't kind of go down the same alley, as you may, no pun intended, but we kind of have our separate views.
And you mentioned it was a little bit of a rough start for you. Can you go into that a little bit? What, starting a new program, it's a daunting task. You're starting from, even like Steve's saying, from finding a bowling center to all the logistical things you're going to. And we haven't even got to finding a team and how to find a team. So can you walk us through some of that and then some of the things now that you hope to improve once everyone does get back out on the lanes?
Well, Auburn only has an 8-lane center. and the people there are trying to sell the bowl. And so when we would try to have practices there, we were limited to 4 lanes, and we really couldn't do a whole lot. Trying to do some one-on-one and some group stuff and some videoing and those types of things. And so I talked to Jerry Kessler. They also coach Baker University, and he owns the bowls here in town, and offered to give us, more lanes and meeting rooms, and they were very accommodating to what we needed to do. So there was a couple of people that owned the bowl up there in Auburn that were holding tryouts, and Skip and I weren't really involved in too much of the tryouts and who to pick and who not to pick. And we have probably 5 or 6 that are decent. We have one girl that's really, really good, one boy that's really, really good. But after that, it's nothing to really brag about. We've got a lot of coaching up to do, and they've got a lot to learn. So we're struggling with that. And now they're coming down here to try to practice here at Gage Bowl. And so the travel time for them is, an hour and a half each way, probably by van. And so there's 3 hours of their day. And then we're going to be here 3 or 4 hours coaching. So it's going to be a long day for those kids. And the college has been very, very accommodating to anything that Skip and I have asked for. And one thing that we asked for is, to be with Storm. We wanted to throw Storm products, and that would be the equipment that we would throw. And they were very accommodating with that. And just everything we've done, they've been great with.
And you mentioned Skip Wilson. I got to brag about him just a little bit real quick, and then I'll ask you a question about Skip. But and I don't think, Tim, you know this. I don't think we've talked about it before, but Skip Wilson was actually the inspiration that I had for starting the Coach K Scholarship, which I've been doing now for 11 years now. And Skip, when I went to school at Wichita State, there was only one alumni supported scholarship, and that was Skip's. And his was the only one for 20 years or so until I started the Coach K Scholarship in 2010. So my hat's off to Skip, and he started something that has now kind of snowballed into, I think the last time I checked, Coach Vatican and Coach Lewis said that we have about a dozen or so alumni-funded scholarships through that program. So Skip's an awesome guy. So tell us a little bit more about Skip Wilson that maybe people wouldn't know.
Well, I met Skip when I was on tour. Most people probably don't know that I went out on tour in 1979, and I used to throw the ball very, very straight. And I struggled. I could hit the pocket a lot, but I couldn't strike with the Holmans and the Roths and the big names. And so I got very frustrated, and I left the tour in '84 for a short stint to change my game, to learn how to hook the ball. Wanted to be more versatile. So I took about 2 years off and then came back out in '88. But I used to room with Skip when he first came out, and that's how Skip and I met. And then when I left the tour, Skip and I lost touch with each other, and I had not seen Skip for probably 22 to 24 years. And I happened to be bowling the state tournament in Junction City, and I had shot 300 there in that tournament, and they announced it, and Skip was there, and he was at the other end of the bowling center. I was on the low end, and he was on the high end, and he heard my name, and he come running down there, and that's the first time we had reconnected in, like I said, 22 to 24 years. And since that day, we created a traveling team of nothing but ex-touring players and ex-Wichita State bowlers. And we travel Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Missouri. And we go bowl tournaments more to have fun and just kind of reminisce and talk about old bowling stories. And we haven't been apart since that day when we met, and now we're doing this together.
That's cool. What a cool story. And then, you mentioned too about going out on tour and then coming back, rooming with Skip, but, you'd mentioned not being able to keep up with the likes of, the Holmans and the Roths. So, and when you shot 300 there at Forum Lanes in Grand Prairie, you did that against Mark Roth. So
yes,
how did that, I'm sure I mean, going back to that day just a little bit, what did it feel like to shoot 300 in the championship match for a title against somebody that you had completely revamped your game to try to be able to compete with, and then actually do so against one of the legends in our game?
Well, I've often told people that if they were to have taken the day that this all started, that was my first tournament back on the tour. I had just picked up a sponsor, Richard Altman, which I think most people that were around bowling knew Richard Altman had the best of the best. He had the Ozios and the Ballards and the Duke and Berardi and, had all the big names. He had 12 players, and he picked me up in December of 87. And he said, where do you want to start? And I said, well, I'd like to start at the Quaker State because I led the regional point list and I don't have to bowl the Rabbit squad. So I don't want to bowl the first two tournaments. I want to be prepared for the Quaker State. He said, that's fine. So I went to the Quaker State, and nobody had seen me throw the ball like this. And I led the first round, and then Mark came in and he led it, and I went to second. We just flip-flop back and forth the whole week. And I'll never forget, Henry Gonzalez came in and he said he saw me throw the ball because he saw I was leading. And I threw it a lot like Henry Gonzalez back in the day. He called me back up there and he says, Bob, what are you messing around for? You're leading the tournament. Why are you throwing the ball like that? And I said, Henry, that's how I throw the ball now. And he said, oh my gosh, I've never seen anybody go from what you did to what you're doing now. It's just unbelievable. And I led that week. Going in the position round for the TV show, I was leading the tournament and Mark was second. And I kind of felt like, I'm going to pretend this is the TV show because I just have a funny feeling I'm going to be bowling him for the title. And I shot 279 that game, and he had 269, and I beat him, and that solidified the number one seed. So coming into the next day, Richard Altman came up to me that night going into Saturday, and he said, I can't – that was the first tournament he had put me in, period. And he says, I can't believe you're leading this tournament. And he said, I'm not going to come back tomorrow. I'm just going to watch you on TV. And I said, that's okay, because he had Joe Berardi on the show, and he had Steve Wunderlich as well. He sponsored those two guys. Well, the next day he shows up, and he said, Bob, we haven't even talked about money or the split or anything. And I said, I don't care. I just appreciate you allowing me to come back out on tour and see if I can make it work this time. And he said, okay, we'll sit down and talk when this is over. Well, he had made a bet with Ernie Schlegel sitting there on TV that Richard had told me afterwards, after the show, that Ernie looked at him and said, hey, let's make a crazy bet today. I think somebody's going to shoot 300 today on TV, and I'm going to take Mark Roth, and I'll bet you $10,000 he shoots it. And he goes, well, I'll take my guy Bob for $10,000. Well, then I did what I did.
Wow.
And so when I got done, Richard said, Bob, I don't even want to talk to you right now. I cannot believe what happened. Just go up and announce that drinks are on me for everybody in the bowl. And I was pretty embarrassed because I'd never been in that position before. And so we got done, and Richard said, hey, you don't need me anymore. I'm tearing up your contract. You can go on. And I said, no, you gave me the chance to come back. I feel like that you and I made this work together as a team, and if you drop me, I'm going home. So we made a deal, and I stayed with Richard for 13 years after that. So it's kind of like a fairy tale. If you were to make a movie out of that whole thing, I mean, to do it against a guy like Mark Roth, and I'll never forget the words that him and Johnny Petraglia told me when he stepped up on the lane after I did it. Mark looked at me, and he said, Bob, that's the greatest display of bowling I've seen under that kind of pressure. First time on TV bowling someone like myself I've ever seen in my life.
What a great story. That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you. That's not speechless many times, as Steve can attest, but I kind of am after hearing that. I mean, that's so many ways to go, but I guess, sticking with what you're doing now with coaching, I would say you're living proof that you can take these guys who you said and gals you said who need some work on their game, and you can change